Hi, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to the World Boxing Review radio show. My name is Aaron Snowall. They call me the Hall of Fame trainer of champions. I travel the world for past, present, and future stars. Also on the show today is Mark Irwin coming to you live from Rochester, um, New York City. He's having problems with his the video part of the phone, so he'll be coming to you live audio with me as we're going to go over the great middleweight fighters in Philadelphia. However, before we get started, we'd like to send our deepest condolences out for the loss of a great heavyweight champion named George Foreman. He's a two-time heavyweight champion who won a gold medal in the 1968 Olympics. And also, he won the heavyweight title by beating no other than an all-time great himself, Smoking Joe Frazier. George, who will always be remembered for the great things that he done in life, his great family that he has, that cooking grill, the George Foreman grill,
Yep.
something that he came up with on his comeback that made millions and millions of dollars, and it sits in millions of households around the world. And those deepest feelings go out to his children. Uh, may they find peace and tranquility with that. But it was Muhammad Ali's former wife, Khalila Camacho Ali, who called me on the phone and made me aware that George Foreman had passed. So that connection with the Muhammad Ali and George Foreman family, uh, they stay connected. A few weeks ago, months ago, George Foreman had all of those families together, Muhammad Ali's children and his children together down there in Texas, where he's at. So, and also, we like to say, man, Mark, man, isn't that something that to lose a great fighter like George Foreman?
Yeah, well, it is. It was really a surprise because I guess I didn't know that he hadn't been well. I remember all that whole business very well. I remember in the '68 Olympics in Mexico City when he won that, and he displayed his patriotism by waving an American flag. And it's like kind of an ironic note to that. The same night that he won the title was the same President Lyndon Johnson, former President Lyndon Johnson, died that same day. And Johnson had Foreman to the White House following the Olympics in '68, and I always thought that was kind of ironic that those events both occurred the same day. Plus, you mentioned, Smoking Joe Frazier. Yeah, he dethroned a great middleweight, excuse me, a great Philadelphia fighter, Smoking Joe. And that was, yeah, I really like George Foreman. I wanted to ask you, though, did you work in the corners of any of Foreman's opponents?
No, well, I'll tell you this here. When I was a kid, when Ali and George Foreman was getting ready to fight in the Thrilla Manila, Ali put me in a commercial with him. Me and
Right.
Ali rapping back and forth, talking about how he was going to beat George Foreman. So that was a historical moment. But George Foreman, when I was training Mike Tyson was then the undisputed youngest heavyweight champion of the world. We were in Las Vegas getting ready for a fight. And it was myself, Duke Durden, Ron Weathers, Carl King. We were at this restaurant, and Ron Weathers, who was working with George at the time, had put George on the phone with us. And at that time, George Foreman said to me, he said, "Look, Aaron, I'm making a comeback, and I want you to train me." And I said, "Man, I'm flattered, George, but I have to decline at this period of time." He said, I told him, because with the training the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and his name is Mike Tyson. I said, "I'm flattered. I said, you're a great fighter, and I'm pretty sure you will have a successful uh, comeback at that time. He said, well, I'm going to do it. And, a lot of things we talked about. But yeah, those memorable moments of George Foreman asking me to work with him, man, was a blessing. George was a blessing, man. And you talk about great trainers, man. George Foreman had some of the greatest trainers in the world work with him. He always went for the best. That's why he
Yeah,
did the best from Doc Brodus. He had Angelo Dundee when he became the oldest
yeah,
heavyweight
later on.
champion of the world. He had Archie Moore. He had Gil Clancy train him at one time. And his brother, who is also a dear friend of mine, Roy Foreman, who does talk radio and all that now, work with him. And I want to thank him, Roy Foreman, for the work that he did with his brother. He was with his brother through thick and thin. And man, they
Yeah.
rose to greatness together. And even that he parts, I'm pretty sure George Foreman kids and his brother Roy will carry his legacy on, which is second to none.
Well, he had Dick Sadler as well. So that's
Yes,
kind of
he did.
interesting. You mentioned Angelo Dundee working for Foreman later on. And they were definitely rivals that night in Zaire. And Sadler later on went to work with Muhammad Ali for a while, right? Was he
Yeah,
there with you
Dick.
in Deer Lake?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got Dick Sadler was in Muhammad Ali's training camp in Deer Lake, Pennsylvania. Yes, I knew of Dick Sadler. I talked to him many times. He gave me many tips of training, Dick Sadler. But those names that we both mentioned, they're all-time great trainers in the sport of boxing. And for George,
That's
and I can't forget Bobby Lewis. Bobby Lewis was Olympic uh, coach, and he worked with Ron Lau and a little bit with George Foreman too. And Bobby Lewis also trained Michael Dokes and Ron Lau and a lot of great other champions. So yeah, man, a lot of people, a lot of families are going to miss Big George, and but the memories are going to live on. And to have a great promoter like Don King put out a video, his tribute to George Foreman was second to none. I mean, Don King really laid it out and spelled it
yeah.
out, because George
Yeah.
Foreman was one of the first fighters that signed with Don, with the contracts that he signed with Don King. And a lot of people don't know, man, this speak of the kind heart that George Foreman had. George Foreman gave Don King's wife, he bought it for her, a Corniche Rolls Royce in
Wow.
a convertible one. And Don King and his family still have that Corniche Rolls Royce that George Foreman bought Don King's wife that car. And what, man, what a kind gesture. He said she was such a nice person and things like that. She treated him with respect. With George, just he was that type of guy, and he
Well,
bought
that
her that car, and Don King and his family still have that car that George bought him. Among George, George collected a lot of cars too. So,
Yeah,
but
I knew he was big into cars. I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. He was into him his first go around as champ. There was a picture. I think it was on the ring, on the cover with him standing in front of some of his cars.
yeah, yeah. And
Yep.
that's just some of the kind things that George did. But he was the boxing preacher, man. Let me tell
Yeah,
you. It shows you after he fought Jimmy Young and he said he saw God, and he stayed out of the ring 10 years.
yeah.
And
Just
then the
preached.
reason why he was making the comeback was when he made that comeback is that he was preaching and teaching God's word, the gospel, the good news, the coming of the Lord. And
Amen.
he was doing things because the young is the future. If you don't push into the future is not grasped. So he was had kids, a youth program going, and he was going around at the time. He didn't have a lot of money, and he had used up a lot of his money um, doing that. And no one would give George money. to support his program. Isn't that something? A
Yeah.
great champion like that.
Uh,
But, God has its own destiny for people. George gloved up. He went back to doing what he started as a troubled kid, and George gloved up at that age, man, and came back and became the oldest heavyweight champion of the world, man. Well, what a blessing. It shows if you stick to something through time, in the end, we all win.
well, it was a remarkable night, when he beat Michael Moore. I really, you could see what his strategy was in that fight, that he wasn't going to try to engage more in a boxing. He knew he'd get outboxed by Double M, but he was waiting for that opening and he found it. And
Yeah,
that
well,
was,
it was a classic what you do to a southpaw, a lead right hand, and George put the hardest punch in boxing to get away from is called the Great 1-2, or a jab right hand, because it comes straight down the pike at you. And
right.
that's what George did. He put together a phenomenal 1-2. Boy, it hit Michael Moore right, smack dead on the chin and down, and he went. And I can remember as clear as day. And when he went down, George went to the corner and fell on his knees and thanked the Lord of the trials and
Mhm.
tribulations he's been through, and the recapture something 10 years later that he lost, that he never thought he could be beat. And when Muhammad Ali beat him um, in Zaire, Africa, by stopping him, and then he tried to come back and fight, and Jimmy Young sent him into retirement where he said he's seen God. And for that to happen is a blessing. It shows you have to stick to something and believe in your faith, and your faith will carry you through. And the preacher man came through in grand style and grand fashion in many ways, as a preacher. And George and Muhammad Ali, they became very good friends. A lot of people
Yeah, I
don't
know
know.
they did.
Yeah, and they
I know
used to
they
talk
did.
on the phone all the time. Uh, Ali and George. And George used to talk about that. And Ali, when he was um, uh, going through his Parkinson's syndrome, uh, shaking and all of that kind of stuff, George used to call and talk to him and try to keep him inspired and sing. What a blessing, man.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was wonderful thing to see, the rapport that the two of them developed for sure. And it was, I would say about George Foreman. I mean, really, I think in a lot of ways, you'd have to say he really had the most successful career probably of any boxer in history, really. I'm not saying he was the greatest boxer, but in terms of what he did as a figure outside of the ring, and with the grill, and I remember Meineke muffler that he used to advertise too, and uh, the money that he made later on, in his life, he really came away from it probably, certainly if not the best, it was certainly as well as anyone who ever stepped into the ring.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What a great investment. The people that invested, George. I think in the beginning people were like, when George was talking about eating hamburgers and belly bumping, they wanted George to talk about sitting in a rocking chair, drinking beer and eating burgers, but George wouldn't. He stayed away from that.
Yeah,
The drinking beer part. But he did keep the burger part of it, and belly bumping, and all of that, and about his grill, the grease, and all that. What amazing thing
yeah.
for him to make a comeback like that, man.
Well,
But
no, it was truly remarkable, and it was Irwin too. He gave Evander Holyfield a pretty good run for his money too. That was I mean, Evander won, but it was a good fight. I mean, Foreman was definitely in that. There was a couple times, one or two more punches, the result might have changed.
yeah, it shows you how bad George Foreman was when he was young, man. He was definitely, uh, him and Mike Tyson would fit hand in hand with the knockouts, man. Anytime that fight with Ron Lau and George Foreman,
Oh my
that
gosh.
is a much watched fight. If anybody want to understand boxing, how difficult it is, them two were slugging it out. One go down, the other get up, and it was just back and forth for being knocked down. And George Foreman end up knocking Ron Lau out. What an amazing fight. and
Well,
then
I think
for
it
what he
showed
did.
form. I'm sorry. I think it showed Foreman's amazing heart. I remember going into that fight. Lyle had a couple. He'd lost to Ali and he'd lost to Jimmy Young again. And I went in that fight. I actually have to admit I bet on it, and I bet on Lyle. And the reason why was because I just thought he needed it worse at the time. Lyle really needed. Lyle was pretty close to the end, and Foreman, didn't, he was kind of coasting. He didn't fight a lot after Ali. And I remember Lyle had him down twice in that fight. And boy, what a man. In Foreman's, both of them really. But I got to be good friends with Ron Lyle later, but that was another story. Um,
Yeah,
I just thought, yeah, I mean, Foreman's heart was just carried him through. I mean, he was on the floor twice. He got up and
well, he had a lot of knockouts, but anytime you got Joe Frazier on that list, knocking him out twice, Ernie Shavers, Ken Norton, Ron Law, Scott Ledoux. Man, when you get names, those names in boxing that you knocked out, boy, oh boy, you were a puncher second to none. And George Foreman has those names
yeah,
on his list. The list is long, fine, and distinguished. But George Foreman was definitely something, and he's something to remember in boxing. And I'm pretty sure Roy Foreman, his brother, will help carry his legacy on. But we had another death too, Livingstone Bramble. Uh, uh, Once George was announced that he passed on Saturday, last Saturday, Livingstone Bramble passed.
yeah.
So,
Well,
our
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. That one there, I got to tell you, there's a very personal connection for me with Livingstone because he won the title in Buffalo against Ray
Mhm.
Mancini at the old
Right,
Odd.
yeah,
And I thought, in my opinion, I thought Bramble pretty much took control of that fight right out of the box. I think it was pretty close the first 5 rounds or so, but I was a big Mancini fan, but I did believe that Bramble was taking the fight. Well, the judges had it. Bramble stopped him in the 14th round, and if he hadn't stopped him, he may well have gotten shafted in that fight. Frankly, I mean, the judges had Mancini out in front, and I didn't think so at all. And what I wanted to say about that was there were some people at the arena there in Buffalo that were, it was a Mancini crowd. There's just no two ways about it. And a lot of people were very much less than pleased about the way that it was going. And it always bugged me to see Bramble not really get his due, get to enjoy from the fans when he won his title.
yeah,
And years later at Ring 44 in Buffalo, which I'm the vice president of, I wasn't at the time, but we did honor Livingstone years later. And he had a very good time. He came to Buffalo and had a great time there. And that meant a lot to me personally, because I wanted him to see that we're not all, we're not all jerks, frankly, for lack of a better, that. And we honored him twice in Rochester, actually 2 times. And he had a great time both times that he was in Rochester. And he was a lot of fun. He was a lot of fun. He was. Can I just tell one story though about that Buffalo fight with Bramble?
okay,
He got a guy. He saw some guy on the street. I don't know. It was just some guy. And I know you know the story, but
right,
Bramble got an idea in his head. He had an idea. It was a older black gentleman, and he got him a pair of sunglasses and a bowler hat and a cane.
uh-huh.
And he sent him over to Mancini's training camp and told him to watch him. Just keep your eyes right on him. Just everything he does, look at him, look straight at Ray. And well, Ray maybe became convinced that he was a voodoo priest or something. He was some sort of shaman. And the guy wasn't anything. I mean, he wasn't anybody. He was just a guy Bramble had hired to do that. And but I got under Mancini's skin a little bit, I think. And Mancini said it afterwards. He sent a voodoo priest over to my camp, to curse me. Well, it wasn't that at all, actually. But a lot of times the impression means more than the actual thing.
Yeah,
And
Yeah, well, right there in Rochester, you're vice president of Rochester Boxing Hall of Fame. Just for namesake, to keep things in order. You talk about Buffalo, but right there in Rochester, he lost
Yeah.
to a Rochester fighter.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Charles the Natural Murray.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Lost. I believe they fought twice.
Twice. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Won both
yeah. He
times.
lost a unanimous decision. I believe it was the last time around.
Yeah.
But yeah, but he had wins, over who
Lots of people.
Tyrone Crawley and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
That was a big one. That Tyrone Crawley was a big fight for him. Yeah. That was,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely. And Freddie Pendleton, him and Freddie Pendleton fought their tail off to a draw, I believe it was. Uh,
yeah.
Back
Well,
in the
he
day.
Bramble later on in his career, after losing the title, he did kind of he didn't his record wasn't real great after that, which I think is kind of a shame because I think he probably should be in the Boxing Hall of Fame and international. And
Uh-huh.
I think they hold that later record against him. And it's too bad. Even if they put him in now, it's really too late for him to enjoy it. And I think it's a shame that it didn't take place. I'm glad we did honor him in Rochester. Like I said, he had a great time there, and he had others too in New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
He was
And,
honored by
and
a number of Hall of Fames.
yeah,
But
from St. Kitts, Livingstone Bramble from St. Kitts, which people may not be familiar. He just grew up in St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, over there where Julian the Hawk Jackson is from. Manuel Griffith uh, is from there, and he comes from an island that produced some of boxing great, like Emma Griffith, a six-time world champion,
yeah,
Julian Jackson. You're talking about punching power, another um, dynamite puncher who's going into the Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame, coming down in September. So September 25th, I believe. But yeah, he's from that. He's from them islands over there in the Caribbean. Boy, I mean, them guys, when they come, man, they're hungry, and Livingstone was hungry too. But our prayers and condolences from the World Boxing Review goes out to his family, Livingstone Bramble, also. And we're
absolutely.
going to take it overseas. Colin Hart,
Yes.
uh,
Glad you
uh,
mentioned it.
who is a Hall of Fame writer, reporter, who used to come in the United States, come cover boxing all the time, and a dynamite writer from over there in London. He also passed. So our prayers and condolences go out to his family.
Did you
Um,
know him very well?
yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
Well, I met him the year he got inducted in Canastota, and I got to chat with him quite a lot. He was a very personable fellow,
Yes, he
and
was.
yeah, he really was. He really was. Very nice man. Very nice man. And I did get to speak with him, so I was glad to meet him. And there's a few guys like that, peripheral boxing people that you admire through the years, that Canastota brings in. I met Bowie Fisher when he was there
Mhm.
with Shane Mosley. And
Mhm.
I got to chat with him. I remember the late. I bet you know. Did you know Eddie Vick?
Yes.
Yeah, very nice man. Very nice man. He loved to talk boxing, and he came to Canastota a couple of times. And I personally, I got as much enjoyment out of talking to a lot of those guys as you do, from the big name fighters. Eddie
Well,
Vick
yeah,
was,
yeah. Well,
but
Colin Hart, he could write. He could
yeah,
definitely put the pen to the paper, and he could write about boxing's second to none. I mean, he covered boxing for a long time, but I always enjoyed his boxing writing that he did. He wasn't bitter towards boxing like a lot of those sports writers uh, became at one time.
yeah,
Colin Hart was never like that. The way he seen it, he wrote it, and it was in a truer fashion to uplift the sport and not so much of the negative to kill a sport. And a lot of stuff that we're seeing over in England and stuff now, is a lot of hard work from great promoters like Eddie Hearns and Colin Hart, who wrote and stuff like that. They
Well,
helped build the fan base
I met
by
Reg Gutridge too.
popularizing.
I'm
Huh?
sorry. I met Reg Gutridge too. Was I really enjoyed speaking with him. You know, he was a great British boxing writer,
Yeah,
and he actually wrote a book. He wrote a book on Mike Tyson
yeah, yeah.
earlier in Tyson's career. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, there was a lot of great, writers and promoters over there. Mickey Duff, I had quite a few
Oh yeah.
fighters go to England. Tim Witherspoon, who fought in England quite a few times in big fights, who set the record. Him and Frank Bruno had the record over there in England. Colin Hart was writing then when Frank Bruno and Tim broke the record in Wembley Stadium for the attendance record was over 43,000.
No
And
kidding.
then, yeah, and then Tyson Fury and them came along and blew it out the box with Frank Warren. Frank Warren was part of that event too, because him and Don they were working together.
Okay.
Don was, and Eddie Hearn's father, Barry Hearns. They used to work with Don. Don used to bring a lot of fighters over to put a lot of things. Azuma Nelson, when he fought Pat Cordell over there. Tim Austin, when Tim Austin fought in Hull, England. Yeah, we were over there a lot with a lot
Okay.
of great matchups. And Colin Hart was there writing, putting a pen to it to help sell the fight. And his great writing style that Colin Hart had was second to none. So our
Yeah.
prayers and all that go out to Colin Hart and his family, and may the Lord continue to bless the family through these moments in life for and make you question yourself, review yourself, and I hope you see the light of the Lord and be able to move forward. So
Amen.
let's look at some announcements that were made. It looks like while we're talking about heavyweights, it looks like Dante Wilder, who is 43-4-1 now. June 27th in Kansas City, he's going to um, have a fight, and we're going to see what he's going to look like in this fight. Maybe he'll get a win and be able to climb back up the ladder and thing and challenge for the heavyweight championship of the world. Former WBC heavyweight champion Dante Wilder, the Brass Bomber,
Yeah.
is coming back. So that should be interesting in that kind of fight. Let's see if Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and all the
Mm.
King's forces and all the King men can put Humpty back together again. Let's see. We're going to watch to see that happen on June 27th, 2025 of this year. But
Terrell Herndon.
also, yeah,
Terrell Herndon.
also announced is that Terrence Crawford will not return to 154 pounds. The WBO had mentioned that he is relinquishing that belt and he
Oh,
plans not to be at 154 pounds. And let's see if Canelo Alvarez in his fight really comes off later
yeah.
on this year.
Yeah.
It's going to be waiting to see. And
Oh,
in the meantime,
he wants to go full fledged middleweight. Just he wants to go to middle then
yeah,
completely.
yeah. Well, I think their fight, Canelo Alvarez and him, if they do climb in the ring, I think it's going to be a catch weight.
Okay.
And when you're pound for pound the best, that's what pound for pound the best mean. At any weight, any guy could fight a guy at any weight and win. Like
Right.
Billy Conn fought Joe Louis. He didn't weigh no heavyweight. He came at a
No.
catch weight and they fought. And that's what should happen in this kind of fight. And I think we will see who is pound for pound the best, because people for a lot of times questioning that, and we should be able to find that out later on this year if both of them climb in the ring like they say they are. But Bob Arum, he also made an announcement. He said he advised Tyson Fury to stay in retirement. you
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, because they're
I
offering a
think that's
ton of
wise.
money. Fake Paul, Jake Paul, are looking at these older guys, and he's doing a great job. He's helped carrying the sport. He's selling tickets with whatever he's doing, but he's going around picking and choosing who he wants to fight, and he's pick and choose Tyson Fury saying that he wants Tyson Fury. So it's
Yeah.
funny how it goes on to keep themselves in the news, but we'll see what happens. Bob Arum told him to stay out of retirement, and that's what I'm telling him.
Yeah,
Don't
well,
let
I
the
would too.
handshake don't let the handshake and the smile fool you. You know, just stay where you're at until you really want to. If that's what you really want to do, and it ain't just all kind of crazy money being thrown at you. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
get you to do something like that, and you know they'll ruin your
Right.
reputation. They'll turn it to dirt if you let them. You know what I
Well,
mean?
a lot of good guys, right? They got had their memory right because of that. You know, they wanted the money, or they threw a lot of money at them and took fights that were very ill advised and fights that they didn't really have proper time to get ready for and whatnot that damaged their records. I wanted to ask you something about that though, Aaron. Is that well, we were talking about guys moving up in the divisions. How do you feel about that personally? I mean, I realize now, you know, that really since the time, I mean, obviously it's always been done, but you look at like when Alexis Arguello was going for his fourth division. And of course, you know, if you want to go way back, I mean, Henry Armstrong held 3 titles at the same time, and then they stopped allowing that because of him. And he really should have been four from everything I've ever heard about that.
Yeah. Well,
But anyway,
life is
what?
about a forward motion. When you see guys that are great fighters, you know it ain't the size that the winner you fail; it's the size of the fight that you have in your heart.
Right.
And they can come in at the best weight that they can and still perform fight guys heavier than them. No one to note it is Roy Jones, but you know,
Yeah.
as long
Well,
as you don't put on a lot of weight that slows you down, take away your skills or something like that,
but
you
what I'm
just fight
asking
at the
is,
best weight possible because it's all about skill and will. If you have the right skill and you have the right will, you know, little men are giants too. And
right.
and that's the way you have to have that kind of outlook, and you have to perform at your best and not try to match the physical up. It ain't about the physical; it's about will and skill.
Well,
That's what it's about.
I guess the question though, I think what I'm trying to get at is, do you miss the days a little bit though when you had guys like Joe Brown in the lightweight division? You know, they had the title for 7, 8 years, you know, and just stuck with that title, or you know, like Duran. Duran was totally dominant at lightweight. You know, he ran into the problems when he moved up, although he had some great moments that way too. You know, going up to middleweight, you know, going as far as middleweight. But I just, me personally, I just kind of miss the days where like Jose Naples, you know, held the welterweight title for a long time. I kind of miss, like, I know he tried to move up against Monzon, but that was very unsuccessful. I just think that I'd like to see some of the young, you know, the lighter division champs actually build up the record. The way, man, we're going to talk about soon, I believe, Bernard Hopkins, you know, having the middleweight title for 11 years.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's guys. Well, you mentioned Roberto Duran.
okay.
Uh, you know, it's all about lifestyle. You know, Roberto Duran loved, he enjoyed food, he loved to eat. So he would eat himself out of division and not training in between fights. But his will and his skill was so superior, he could get away with things like that when he was younger. As he got older, that those type of things catch up with you if you don't stay in shape. You mentioned Bernard Hopkins, and we'll be talking about him later on. One thing about Bernard Hopkins, he till a day, Bernard Hopkins still stays in phenomenal shape, and he can at that time could fight anytime. He all the time stayed ready. But yeah, so today we'll be talking about on this part of the show some of the great middleweight fighters that come from Philadelphia. And boy, is this list long, fine, and distinguished. First of all, we'll start off with Joey Giardello, who was a New Yorker born in Brooklyn, New York, and moved to Philadelphia, South Philly, that was where he grew up. So a lot of people don't know he's from Brooklyn, but he did grow up in when he was a kid in South Philly, and as an older moved over uh, to Jersey. So
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about Joey Giardello?
Well, I think Joey Giardello. I actually did have the pleasure to meet Joey Giardello a few times. He used to come to Canastota. He was one of the regulars in the early years, and he was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, which I think one of the early days. So I think that says a lot about him. I think you look at his record; he just had an incredible resume and names. I mean, the guys he fought were just truly remarkable. He owned a win against Sugar Ray Robinson, and I know this
Yeah,
late in Robinson's career, but he did beat him, and I think Robinson showed right up until the end. You look at even up until his last fight against Joey Archer, Robinson still had a lot of fire in the furnace. He could still bring it home, and Joey beat him. Joey later on in life, I tell you a funny thing with him. I was talking to him outside Graziano's, and he said that I said, hey, I said, none of these people even, people were asking for his autograph, and he says, none of these people even know my real name. And I said, Carmine Talali. And he looked at me. He he seemed to be impressed that I knew it, but that was his born name. He actually took up Joey Giardello. I don't know if you knew this. He took it up
yeah, I
so
know.
he could join the army, and
Yes,
he
he
was only
did. He spent
16.
time in yes, he spent time in the army, but he was all when he fought up in New York, Madison Square Garden. That the syndicate mob. He was caught on that, and he helped expose what they were doing. Joey did.
That's interesting. Well, he
And
had
don't forget, he fought Dick Tagger. Dick
twice.
Tagger, who is from Nigeria, is one of the first African middleweight
Middleweight.
champion. Dick Tagger was from Nigeria.
Well, he
So
fought Tiger twice. Yeah, he fought Tiger
yes.
twice and beat him the first time and lost to him the second. And I'll talk about the
Mhm.
in between there too, because there's a very
Yeah.
interesting story connected with that. But Dick Tiger was a great middleweight, lasted a long time, had a long career. He actually fought, when he fought Fulmer in Nigeria, was that the first middleweight title fight in Africa?
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Gene Fulmer,
And also, in 1948, I believe, he fought for that NABA championship, which is part of the WBA at that time. So that organization that he fought that NBA title, and now I'm not talking about basketball and the National Boxing Association.
yeah, that
For
was.
the listening audience, he did win that. I believe that was the first belt he won in 1948, and he went on to win the WBA and the WBC titles. So,
Well,
um,
the thing about it in those days, though, was the guys weren't afraid. The guys weren't afraid to lose a fight once in a while. It didn't. You look at Giardello's record; he had, he obviously won the vast majority of his fights, but he also, he lost some along the way. And what did it hurt? It was really. He got experience out of it. Learned things, and came back. Came back stronger the next time. He I thought Giardello too, though, was I wanted to ask you your opinion about that. He after he won the title against Tiger, well, no, I'm going to go back a little bit before that because he fought three times, I believe, against a fellow from Buffalo with a
mhm.
very similar name. It was Joey Giambra.
Well, yeah, but that's
And Joey
yeah.
Giambra, and Giambra beat him twice, actually. Giardello beat him once. And did you read Joey Jambra's autobiography?
No, I didn't.
Well, it was interesting. He wrote it later on. He was a cab driver out in Las Vegas, and
Uh-huh.
he put together he called it the Uncrowned Champ. And Boxing Illustrated actually did some excerpts of it. And he
Yeah.
talked about some of the things with the mafia. He mentioned that as well.
Yeah, because the mafia was running with Forrest and them was running Madison Square Garden, and those fighters that fought in there, they were instructed what they had to do in order if they wanted to keep fighting there at the Garden, and most of them were managed by Blinky. uh,
Yeah.
they had all
Palermo.
of it
Yeah.
set off, Palermo. So yeah, there's a lot of history and interesting history when it comes, and that's why they a lot of times in boxing, those stories that came out in that time period about the mob fixing fights in Madison Square Garden. So that's why people, those legendary tales still are carried on till the day from stuff like that.
I
But
wanted to ask you about the
anyway,
fight. Go ahead. I'm sorry. The fight in between, though, after when Giardello won the championship against Tiger, and then before he lost it again to Tiger, his fight with Ruben Hurricane Carter.
yeah, from North.
Right. Well, that seemed to be a very Patterson, right? Yeah, Newark, Patterson, that area. But anyway, that seemed to be a very polarizing fight right there. I
Yeah,
know the way
yeah,
that.
that happened. I think 10 days before Christmas. I think it was like December 14th, 1964. I think it was when he
Okay,
fought Carter
because I
in
knew.
that title defense, and it looked like Carter, from my perspective, was stocking him. Walking him down the first three fights. I mean, the first three rounds.
Yeah, I know. I don't think
And then
anyone could question that.
Carter opened it. He opened a cut. Carter did over his eye.
Yes, he did.
In the third round or the fourth round, somewhere in there, if I can remember correctly. Sometimes to have all that in your head, but I think it was either the third or fourth round. He opened a cut,
Well, what I
and
wanted to.
by the 13th round, Carter got tired. That what's why it's known as the championship rounds.
That's
You
right.
know, you know what
Right.
I mean. He got tired in that. So
Well, I remember the
summer
way they
for that.
depicted it in the movie. So the Carter, really won looked to be a clear winner and everything. But in real life, if you go back to the real life of it, it was a polarizing fight. My dad always maintained that Carter really should have gotten the decision on that one. My dad always thought that Carter won, but I have a lot of accounts of. I have three magazines that have the account of it in the aftermath that I've read. And one of them was International Boxing. They went along with the verdict pretty well. They thought that Giardello did enough, in the later rounds there to win the decision. And Boxing Illustrated also seemed to take the same line. But over at the ring, Dan Daniel, was a big boxing writer.
Mhm.
He was outraged at it. He seemed to think that Carter should have gotten it, and he wrote very clearly
Well,
that he thought it was a bad dupe. So usually when you see a fight like that, that really usually means it could have gone either way. I've tried to watch it. There's a very poor quality black and white film of it existent, and I don't know.
yeah,
It looked to me
yeah.
like
Well, what was it? I believe it was 2000 or 19. You know, uh, somewhere around 2000. The film Hurricane came out once he got
right.
his freedom from jail. Yeah, many thought that the unanimous decision that was given to him was unfair and unjust about Carter. But however, the record stands where it is, and we're not
Mm,
going to keep pondering back and forth
right.
of the decision, because this decision is history and it's a part of history, and that's what makes history. We have our viewpoints and our thought, and we got to move here pretty fastly to get through the rest of these great middleweights
Okay.
in
Okay.
Philadelphia. Even
Would you
though,
mind terribly if I went back in time a little bit before Giardello? Because one of the ones you didn't mention was Philadelphia Jack O'Brien.
yeah, Jack
And
O'Brien fought in my hometown with a Pottsville. Jack O'Brien there, and he lived there for some time.
how about that? I just, because he's mainly remembered, of course, for his fights against the heavyweights. He beat both Marvin Hart and Tommy Burns, and fought a draw with Jack Johnson, a 6th round, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, with
yeah,
Jack Johnson. He uh, had other things in his career besides that as a middleweight. He beat Barbados Joe Walcott, who was, there's still some people that believe that he was the Barbados Joe was the best welterweight champ. and he was trying to move up, and O'Brien beat him. He also beat Jack Blackburn. Man, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago or last month there. Joe Lewis's chappie, Joe Lewis's trainer. He beat 1908.
Yeah,
He
well,
beat.
his name, that ain't in his original name, Jack O'Brien. He changed. I think it was Joe Francis
Okay.
Hagan or something like that. Jack O'Brien.
Well, a lot of that
He's
went on. Yeah.
yeah. That was his original name. But
That was.
Jack O'Brien, basically, he was a light heavyweight and a boxing champion back then. He was a light heavyweight, but
Well, if he started out at
in the
155.
middleweight, Jack O'Brien spent time in my hometown, and he helped change the rules. The first boxing commission in Pennsylvania started in my hometown. The mayor of Pottsville helped put the rigs in the state of boxing commission of Pennsylvania. And Jack O'Brien and them was fighting in there a lot. So, he grew up to a heavyweight after when he was young in the middleweight, but he's best known for his light heavyweight work. But
Yeah.
we're gonna
Okay.
move into a real Philadelphia middleweight. No other than one of the greatest fight middleweights of all times, Bernard Hopkins.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm actually one of the electors for eyebrow, and I probably eyebrow rates him as eighth of all time. I think that's too low. I personally say first. I think that people that will go against that, will always mention the Roy Jones Jr. fight, but I think what you need to remember about that Jones Jr. fight was that he was younger then. I mean, Jones beat him. There wasn't any question about it, but it was very, very close. It was not by any means a one-sided fight, and I would say Bernard, built off of that. He learned from it, and was a better middleweight in the next. It's a shame, really, that they didn't fight again right away. I know they did have that fight years later, but Jones always wanted Hopkins to take short money, though, and why should he? I mean, it was after Trinidad. Yeah.
What makes Bernard Hopkins such a interesting, great fighter, to spend his youth in the penitentiary system and then working hard and then coming out, turning pro and losing his first bout. And after he lost his first professional bout, he would rack up a record, second to none when it came out of boxing. He just
Right.
turned everything around. During that time, he met a good, solid trainer named Bowie Fisher, who he believed in and trusted in, and helped guide him to greatness. Bowie Fisher was someone who was around a lot in the Philadelphia gyms at that time, who had a heavyweight named Jesse Ferguson that really put Bowie on the map. But Bernard Hopkins helped carry and listen to his ideals of training and staying in shape and being prepared all the time. And it carried him over for Bernard Hopkins. I mean, Bernard Hopkins is one of those fighters, man, to beat Carlos Monzon, who had the middleweight record for the most title defenses. Bernard Hopkins did that,
Right. Well, he surpassed that record. Absolutely. Yeah. 19, I believe, right? At the end of the
at
night.
the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
19 successful middleweight defenses, 11 years as champion. And I'll always get somebody say, well, he was only undisputed champion for 4. I say, yeah, because none of the other ones would fight him. It wasn't because of him. Bernard was ready to fight. They were just a lot of people dodged him along the way. And your friend Don King actually facilitated that. I think he was doing it for Trinidad, but it turned out to work to Hopkins' advantage because he, Hopkins obviously came out supreme in that. He beat all those guys, and I thought he was giving Trinidad a pretty good beating. I know that before Hopkins stopped him, one judge had Trinidad ahead, which I I don't see watching the fight. I don't see how that's possible.
Yeah, well,
I
anytime that you have wins over Trinidad with all his title defenses, and also Oscar De La Hoya,
oh,
to have wins over him in the way that he won was second to none when
well,
it came to that. But
it
Bernard
was the liver
Hopkins,
shot. It was the liver
yeah,
shot. It was the shot to the liver. Boy, it paralyzed him, and Oscar, and he paralyzed Oscar, and that was that was a beautiful fight. He just fought a beautiful. I know that's another one. You were talking about Foreman and Ali. I think Bernard and Oscar became very good friends after that fight as well.
yeah. Well, they still friends. They work together now in boxing promotion. But you know, Artie McLeod, who I the pleasure of training, he was a great middleweight, and he was the uncle of Bernard.
Okay.
And Artie used to take Bernard to the gym and give him some tips and things like that. But those early classes of learning with Artie McLeod was slicker than ice axle grease, and he could punch
Hmm.
second to none. Artie McLeod, and some of those given talents that Artie McLeod had, he passed it on to his nephew called Bernard Hopkins, because Bernard was slicker than ice axle grease, and he could whack a second to none. And from him being in shape all the time, you know, helped carry them through. And that's how he was able to maintain that weight, 160 pounds, for that longer period of time, where he wasn't fluctuating in weight and coming down, where he loses muscle fiber and strength and things that happens to a lot of guys. Bernard stayed in dynamite shape.
Yes, he
Um,
did. Yes,
you
you
know,
know another thing. Can I just mention about you talk about slicker than axle grease, and the punching power? Because I mean, to beat a guy like Winky Wright, who was in the, was a Hall of Fame fighter in his own right, and a defensive specialist. I mean, that really was Wright's. Are you there, Aaron? Aaron?
hello.
Aaron? Aaron? Hi, Aaron. Can you hear me? No?
Yeah, well, as again,
No?
the video and all that, we've all the sound and all of that to Mark.
Aaron?
Are you there, Mark?
I'm here. I'm here.
All right. We lost the sound some way. It got clicked out, but if you want to repeat yourself on that, it'd be good. Yeah, well, as Mark tries to come back in to the feed, he was having trouble anyway in the feed with the video part. Um, so we'll wait to see if he tunes back in here. He's back. Let's see. Well, see, Mark, are you there?
Aaron? I'm here.
All right, you're back on the. You're back. We have you on the sound.
I don't know what happened. I didn't move anything. Nothing moved. It
Had a
just went
feed.
out.
Well, we're streaming live, and you get glitches when people are logging in from all over. It sometimes it does that. It's traffic and the internet, and you're on wireless devices and things like that. So it happened. So reiterate, we're on the World Boxing Review talking about one of the greats of all time, Bernard Hopkins. Go and finish up what you were saying.
Oh yeah, well, I was just saying that Winky Wright. You look at that Winky Wright fight, and he won it. I think two of the three judges gave him 117 points out of 120. To go in with a guy like that late in his career, with a guy that was a defensive specialist, and beat him like that. That was, that was a remarkable. I mean, I think it just shows how good of a boxer that he was.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. William Joppy, Keith Holmes.
Oh,
you know, to have those in that middleweight tournament that Don King did of the middleweight, and Carl Daniels, you know, William Joppy, Robert Allen, who, you know, that was the bout where he fell out of the ring or knocked over. But though that great middleweight tournament was really something, and Bernard Hopkins came out on the top of that to establish in that era
yeah, he sure
him as
did.
being an all-time great heavyweight champion of the world.
Okay, Eric, can I ask you about something? Okay, because some of the names you threw at me was George. One of them was George Benton. And it was
Yeah.
primarily known as a trainer. But I want to hear about the Philadelphia Shell defense.
Well, you know, Georgie Benton was, matter of fact, Slim Robinson, who taught me how to train fighters. Him and Georgie fought as an amateur. Slim had a win over Georgie as an amateur, and lost as a pro. Georgie hit him with a right hand and pushed him out of the ring. And Slim was outside of the rope saying, "I'm gonna knock you out when I get in there." And he got counted out on the floor to count of 18. He had to make it inside the ring before the count of 18, and Slim got counted out. But anyway, Georgie Benton was a great defensive fighter, great counterpuncher. And most of the guys that Georgie Benton trained were great counterpunchers. He worked with Eddie Futch, Georgie Benton did, with Joe Frazier, with Eddie Futch in that era. But a lot of fighters during that era carried their left hand down like that. And you could sit and ride punches and things like that, to be slick and colorful.
Okay.
That was a different style than this traditional thing of holding your both hands up like that, where you can sit and catch and ride punches and counter real good off that defense. And what happens in this era, where they seemed it maximized the most, was uh, Mayweather. Mayweather used that style of defense, and he would sit and ride punches on guys and counter punch them to death, which fighters in this era don't understand counter punching and don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
They're leadoff fighters. When you punch, they'll go on defense. Then when you finish punching, they'll start punching. With that Philadelphia side, teach you to be offense, defense, defense, offense, and you can counterpunch a guy to death in doing that. And
So where does the shell part come into it? Like the Philadelphia Shell, is that just the
yeah, well,
constant
the
barrage?
Philadelphia shell, that's something that they came up with this era. But that style of defense, it goes back a long time in Philadelphia when African American fighters were doing those things to be colorful in the ring. From a traditional hands up like this here style, they developed this style here to be colorful because you could do so much with it.
I see.
And you can draw guys in the throwing different punches at you where you could counter punch them to death, you
Okay.
know, and that's what Mayweather does. Mayweather counter punches these guys to death, and they don't know how to stop a guy countering them so much. And that's what he did to Manny Pacquiao, bless his heart, who's going into the International Boxing Hall of Fame this year in June up there in Canastota, New York, man, international. But that's what Mayweather did with him, just sit and ride punches and counter him to death. Is because when you
Okay.
counter a guy when he's punching, he's wide open. You can hit him with clear shots, and that's
So
part
was
of ring
Ben
general. That's part of ring generalship and scoring defense,
right? So
and a lot of
was
people
Ben
don't do it. Huh?
really a defensive specialist, or was he more of a banger?
Oh, definitely. Georgie Benton was a defensive specialist.
Okay.
I tell you, some of his students that had mastered it. One particularly comes to mind, Evander Holyfield.
Yeah.
Evander Holyfield mastered it. and also Pernell Whitaker.
Yeah, Sweet Pea, absolutely.
He mastered that style of fighting. And also, we used it with Tim Witherspoon. Tim Witherspoon against Larry Holmes to take his jab away from him. You know what
Oh,
I
that was
mean?
a yeah, I do. Well, that was a very that was a controversial fight as well. You know, it was very
Yeah.
people saw that the other way too. I want to ask you though. I mean, I just wanted to mention about Benton. I mean, you look at the names on his list. You know, he beat Holly Mims. He beat
Yeah.
Jimmy Ellis.
Yes, he
That
did.
was that must have been an interesting fight. I mean, because Ellis was kind of a defensive specialist too, so that must have been that was they fought at middleweight, and
Uh-huh.
I'm sure you knew Jimmy Ellis pretty well from Deer Lake.
Yeah, I knew Jimmy Ellis very well, a former heavyweight champion of the world. That's how Joe Frazier got his belt.
Yeah,
And also, he grew up in the hometown of Muhammad Ali. He grew up with Muhammad
Louisville,
Ali. They were
Kentucky.
on the same team, huh?
Yeah, yeah, Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah, he beat Ali once in the amateurs. But Ellis was most of his career, though. A lot of people don't know that he was a middleweight until he hooked up with Dundee. He was always trying to make 160, and he said later on that he thought that hurt his career, trying to stay at the 160. You know, he
Yeah.
just couldn't do it anymore. He fought Freddie Little as well. Benton did, and it was they used to call him the mayor of North Philly.
Yeah, Georgie was something. I love Georgie. Georgie
Yeah,
was that type of guy. A lot of personality, but a lot of knowledge when it came to boxing. I mean, Georgie Benton would sit and ride. You could punch at Georgie all day and night, and he'll sit and ride punches, and he was just difficult to hit. It was it
yeah.
was
Well,
it was
I'm glad I got
difficult
to
to
meet him.
hit.
I did meet him there. He got inducted in Canastota.
Yeah.
I think some of my Rochester friends are going to be mad though if I don't mention Willie the Worm Monroe.
Yeah, well, Willie the Worm Monroe, who has a win over Marvin Hagler. Willie was another one who was slicker than axle grease. Let me tell you, I helped train Willie. I trained him on the tail end of his career, and we used to laugh at this all the time. Me and Willie. When I was young, Willie said, "Well, if you work with me, you'll be a great trainer." And I was working with him when I was assistant trainer with Eddie Mustafa Muhammad when he beat Marvin Johnson, and Willie the Worm Monroe was he was there training at Ollie's camp. He was a sparring partner with Eddie, and I used to work with Willie.
Okay. Well, anyway, he was going back. You probably weren't aware of it in Pennsylvania, but he was actually getting a lot of ink in the Rochester paper because he graduated from high school in Rochester, and he, was a pretty good amateur too.
What you try to teach fighters is a jab, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that jab, Willie the Worm had a jab that was second to none. The way he threw it, the way he mastered, and he's just one of those all-time greats like Boogaloo Watts, who has a win over Marvin Hagler. And then when you mention Philly big names, you can't not mention Benny Briscoe.
Oh yeah. The absolute Bad Bunny. Well, you look at the names on his record too. You know the guys that he fought. That was one of the more interesting fights with Briscoe. I thought was he was coming. Briscoe was coming off a loss and was trying to get back up, and I think he was hoping to use Emil Griffith, a big name at the time, a former
Mhm.
champion in Philadelphia. To build himself back up at the Spectrum, and I believe it drew a pretty good crowd there. And to a lot of people's surprise, Emil took him on a split decision. Were you at that fight?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, but what was that? I think that was kind of a surprise. I think most people really thought Briscoe was going to win that one, but he's still got another title shot after that, though.
Yeah, yes, he did. But
He Rodrigo Valdez.
yes, that's right, Rodrigo
Yeah.
Valdez. But what makes Benny Briscoe so great. He stayed in the gym a lot, the master's trade, and Russell Pelps, who at that time was young and all of that. He would give at the Spectrum and different sites around Philadelphia the opportunity to fight. Didn't pay him much, but
Uh,
he gave them the opportunity to stay busy. And a lot of those great middleweights like Eugene Cyclone Hart, him and Briscoe fought second to none. The ring collapse with Eugene Cyclone Hart in there. Just stuff like and a lot of people don't know Eugene Cyclone Hart was also trained by Customato.
oh,
Customato
really?
trained. Yeah, yeah. He
No, I did
trained.
not know that. So did Cuss
Yeah,
come down, or did he go up to the Catskills?
he was up in the Catskills.
Okay.
He trained up there in the Catskills, and I had the pleasure to work with Cyclone Hart at the end of his career up in Deer Lake.
Okay.
Cyclone Hart was just an amazing boy. That left hook that Cyclone Hart had was second to none, and I believe it came from one of his legs were shorter than the other. His back leg, which is his right hand side, was smaller than his left leg. So when he rocked to turn his left hook over, it was a natural thing that gave him so much power in that left hook he had. So Cyclone was known for his left hook, you
Oh,
know. Yeah. And don't forget about Curtis Parker.
oh my
Curtis
goodness, no. Yeah. Yeah.
Curtis Parker, congratulations. He's going into the Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame September 25th in Atlantic City. He's going to be inducted in that. But Curtis Parker, man, his fight with Dwight Davison
Davidson.
from yeah,
With
was
Davidson and
second.
Curtis Parker. Well, one I also want to mention, and I see where the time's going here. I don't mind. I'll stay on as long as you want. But
Yeah.
what my favorite fighter, and there was a great era there in the early '80s. But my favorite fighter of that time was out of Philadelphia. Actually, that was Frank the Animal Fletcher.
Oh, no
I
question.
oh, that man had some
Frankie
wars,
Fletcher.
didn't he? I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
he did
just
have. Man, he used to light the TV
oh,
screen up on a Saturday afternoon. Frank Animal Fletcher fighting on TV. You talking about blood and guts? It was
oh.
always blood and guts, and he would always come out on top, like a real Rocky fighter, man. Frank the Animal Fletcher, man. He was something. He was,
Well,
but
Caveman Lee, I remember the Caveman Lee
yeah,
fight.
Caveman Lee, yeah, yeah,
And Clinton Jackson. Oh my gosh, what a war that was! I him and
yes,
that's two guys there that just I mean, when they made that matchup, Jackson was giving up a little size on that. I will say in his defense, but boy, that night, I mean, Fletcher, he lived up to his name, the Animal. He was
yeah,
an animal in that fight. That was
yeah, and then you had Dave Love, David Reid. David Reid became middleweight champion, who
yes, he
won a
did.
gold medal in this era. He was middleweight champion, won the WBA middleweight championship, and had a gold medal. And also Yusuf Mack.
Was it Mack? Huh?
Yeah, yeah. And how about Buster?
Buster
Oh,
Drayton?
Buster Drayton. Yeah, Buster Drayton. I could remember on the Wild World of Sports, I was training Julian Jackson, Trump Plaza a week before Mike Tyson fought. Oh, I was training Julian. I was training Julian. We fought Buster Drayton on uh, on CBS
Okay.
on CBS Sports, and Julian ended up knocking him out with a left hook and waved like this and down. And Buster said, "Man, oh man, what'd you have in his gloves?" Buster,
Uh,
a good friend of mine, we used to laugh and joke around about that. But Buster, also fought the Hiltons.
oh yeah,
Uh,
Matthew, right? Matthew and
yeah,
Davey.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, from up that way of Buffalo,
Montreal.
from Canada, yeah, Montreal. So, man, the list is long, fine, but distinguished. of those great middleweight champions, and I'm glad that we could cover that.
Well, he beat
So
Davey
much.
Moore. He beat Davey Moore too. That was
That was a big
That
win
was
for
Moore's last title shot, I believe.
him.
And he'd had the piece of the middleweight title or junior middleweight title for a little while.
Yeah.
And was that fight at middleweight or was it junior middleweight?
It may
The
have been
Drayton
at
fight.
junior middleweight because Buster he fought at junior middleweight and middleweight. He would go up and down.
I see.
Buster did. Yeah.
Okay, I remember that though, because I was a big Davey Moore fan. I was actually, I remember that. I really liked Davey Moore. I mean, I knew that they rushed him in too fast, but I was pretty crushed the night that Duran beat him. Most people seem to be rooting for Duran, but I really liked Davey Moore. I was just, he just was, Duran was on his game and he was overmatched. It was just, he just wasn't ready for that level of competition yet. But anyway, no, that's a phenomenal list there they have out of Philadelphia. I have another one too. He's mainly thought of from Columbus, Ohio, but it was Buster Douglas's dad, Billy Dynamite Douglas. He fought out of Philadelphia for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah, he was in Philadelphia fighting, absolutely, and some of those guys in the list that we just mentioned, he fought, and
Willie
also
Monroe.
Billy Douglas. Yeah, he did.
He did. Did you see that fight or no? Did you see
Yeah,
them?
I seen it.
Okay.
Look.
Did
I'm gonna tell you this.
okay.
A lot of people don't know, and a lot know that the great light heavyweights like Matthew Saad Muhammad. He fought as middleweight and he fought those guys. He fought Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, who was campaigning at middleweight and became middleweight champion. But at middleweight, those guys in Philadelphia with Russell Peltz. Russell Peltz promoted a lot of those great middleweight fighters, and Russell Peltz, a Hall of Famer, man. He put a lot of time in. Russell Peltz used to build them up, and by the time he built them up and made them with names and stuff like that, somebody come along and offer them more money, and off they went.
Yeah.
That's the way
Well, he told a lot about
Russell.
that in his book. $30 at a cut eye. Uh, which is a very interesting title, and it's a very good book. It's a page turner. I would recommend it.
Yeah,
I actually had it on when I thought we were going to have video here. I had it at my desk. I was going to show it to your audience
yeah.
because it. I would recommend it to anybody. It's a very interesting book, and if you want to know about that Philadelphia middleweight scene, I don't think you'll see anyone wrote about it more. From the inside than Russell did.
No,
You know,
absolutely, because Russell Peltz, he promoted a lot of those middleweights during that time, and a lot of them grown to be big names in boxing after they got older in the middleweight. Marvin Johnson you fought in Philadelphia with Saad Muhammad. Some of their wars,
yeah.
middleweight, man, them
Yeah,
fights, him and
war
Matthew
barely
Saad.
describes it. Yeah, that was
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that was a war. I
Richie
want to go back.
Cates.
I'm sorry. I do need to ask you though before we go off that that Monroe Douglas fight. Okay, uh, you said you did see it.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so did
On
you
film
think that
system.
Douglas knocked him out?
Did he knock him out?
Well, I know Monroe won a decision in it, but Powell's actually there was a knockdown, or I don't know if the ref called it a slip or what. I never actually saw the fight, but Russell kind of said in his book that he watched it, said that Monroe was down for about 11, 12 seconds.
Yeah, the long count, but we're again, whatever it states, the record, we can let speculation in the reading or talking, but the real result is that he won.
Right, Willie Monroe won a decision. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
saying a lot too, because Billy Douglas was a dynamite. He was actually a very, very well conditioned fighter. That guy
Yes,
loved
he
to train.
was.
He
Yes, he
loved to
was.
train. He was in phenomenal. If you remember his physique, oh my gosh! I mean, something like just like a board. That would just be like hitting a plank, and that
Yeah,
he
yeah,
was very
like anything. Well, like what I say about speculation. With Mike Tyson losing to Buster Douglas over in Tokyo, is that we know it was a long count, but it still don't change the outcome of the fight. He got
Right.
knocked out.
Right.
And the same with all of that. You have to look at it in reality. The real result ain't going to change.
That's right.
With the speculation, we can talk about it and go on and on about it to create conversation. But the result, and at the end of the day, is that he did beat the youngest undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, one of the greatest heavyweight champions of this era,
Yeah.
Mike
Well,
Tyson. And Mike
well,
Tyson is still one of the great heavyweight champions of the world.
absolutely. Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. And I think that, talking about that again, it's just speculation. I mean, Buster, frankly, he didn't have his dad's training ethic at all. And I mean, Buster's a great guy. I've met him several times. We honored him in Rochester, and very much like the guy. But I mean, when he came in against Holyfield, if he had been in shape in that fight, I mean, we'll never know. But he just, when I saw that he tipped the scales, and what was it, about 240 something?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was just like, okay, I knew he wasn't in shape. It was like that. Just, and his strategy in the fight seemed to be he was just trying to land a haymaker on Holyfield. Well, you can't do that with Holyfield. It's gonna be
No,
you're gonna get your ears boxed off if you. It was just precisely what happened.
Holyfield stays in shape. He's still in
Right.
shape till the day he stays in shape. But hey, look,
Yes.
Mark, man, it was great talking to you this afternoon about some of the great middleweight fighters in Philadelphia. The list is long, fine, but distinguished. And our hats off to each one of them that we had talked about today. It's definitely boxing history in the city of Philadelphia, with all the fighters that come from Philly. One thing you know about a Philly fighter, you better be ready because you're going to be in the fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And well, it was a great subject. It's a great subject. I'm sorry
Yeah,
that
yes, it is.
the video, I'll do like Joe Namath. I will guarantee next show that I will have video there. One way or the other, even if I got to borrow somebody else's phone, I'll get on there. And
Yeah,
it was great talking to you. And I very much enjoyed the discussion, though, because the Philadelphia middleweights, that's a subject you really could go on about for a long time. And I'm glad we got to scratch the surface on a lot of these guys. I mean, a lot of them were huge favorites of mine. Willie Monroe, Bernard Hopkins. It's just Joey Giardello. It's a great subject. And it's always great. I guess maybe I had more questions this time around because I just really like hearing about it from somebody that was there for a lot of it, and you're actually from
yeah.
Pennsylvania. And I love talking boxing with people that know what they're talking about, because I'm always trying to learn more.
Well,
So,
a lot of them guys, we ate and slept together in different training camps, and
yeah.
in the gym in Philadelphia, from so it was great for me to have the opportunity to express some thoughts and opinions about them. But hey, man, we covered it, and it's a difficult thing to do to have the time to do it. And because we could have went on and talked
Yeah.
way more in detail, but we did mention some of their names, and I was happy that we were able to cover that list like that.
Absolutely. Well, I hope
And
the
I'm pretty
audience
sure
enjoyed
that,
it.
yeah, I'm pretty sure the listening audience appreciate it too. Our tribute to George Foreman and also Livingstone Bramble and Colin Hart over there in England. We, our prayers and our condolence again goes out to those families. So,
Absolutely.
look, Mark, we're going to close. I'd like to thank you for coming on to the World Boxing Review. Mark Irwin, who is vice president of the Rochester Boxing Hall of Fame and also vice president of the Buffalo Boxing Hall of Fame, who was our guest today covering the great middleweights of Philadelphia. My name is Aaron Snow. They call me the Hall of Fame trainer of champions. Have we traveled the world for past, present, and future stars? Thank you for tuning in.